there, it's Jessica Honegger, founder of the socially conscious fashion brand Noonday Collection. And this is the Going Scared podcast, where we cover all things impact, entrepreneurship, and courage. Today on the show, we welcome Jenna Kutcher. I got to know Jenna when we traveled to Guatemala together around a year ago with Noonday Collection, and she actually shot the photo we used for the Going Scared podcast. The photos she took on that trip are some of my most favorite ever. Jenna is not only a photographer, but she's a podcaster, educator, and social media influencer. And honestly, she has such a passion to serve entrepreneurs and pour into entrepreneurs' businesses. She even has a master's class where she takes entrepreneurs through an intensive for an entire year. Her podcast, the Gold Digger Podcast, is one of the top-rated business podcasts on all of iTunes. Jenna goes scared in a lot of areas of her life, but one area that I really admire her for is how she's creating a dialogue and space for women to talk about body image and embrace our imperfections. And that is really what our conversation focuses on today. You may know Jenna from an Instagram post that went viral this past year. It was a picture of her and her fitness trainer husband. And here's what she wrote in that post. Someone once slid into my DMs and told me they couldn't believe I had managed to land a guy as good looking as my husband. Part of my insecurity with my body has stemmed around being married to Mr. Six-Pack himself. Why should I, a curvy girl, get him? This man has embraced every curve, every dimple, pound, and pimple for the last 10 years and has always reminded me that I'm beautiful even when my inner dialogue doesn't match. So this post and just her whole story is why I wanted to have her on the show to talk about chapter 4 of my book, Imperfect Courage. Chapter 4 is called Own Your Worth. And for me personally, it's one of the most vulnerable chapters in the entire book because I really take a deep dive into my own journey of self-acceptance. Jenna and I share both of our journeys really vulnerably on today's episode. If you haven't bought the book yet, go buy it. It's out now. You guys, it's at the top of the charts on Amazon. Thank you so much. You guys are buying this book. You're telling your friends about this book. You're being moved by the stories in this book. And I just want to say thank you because I wrote this book for you. I wrote this book for us. Here's the talented, honest, and also hilarious Jenna Kutcher. Hey, Jenna, welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to catch up with you.
I know, me too. That is the benefit of being a podcaster now. I get to be like, ooh, and we just said we both had dreams about each other last night.
Not creepy at all.
Not
totally
creepy.
Not creepy.
So Jen and I actually, just to let you guys know, we got to travel to Guatemala together a few months ago, actually. And that's really where we got to be friends. And we got to have even some of these conversations with each other that we're about to have out loud with you. But I was just telling Jenna that I like talking with Jenna about business. And she has helped me so much, especially as I was launching kind of my own branding stuff and podcasting. Like Jenna is one of those women that's like, I will help you. I want to help you. Like her life's purpose is like, I want to help other women. So I love talking about that. Not so much this whole body image thing, which is what we're talking about today.
Oh, Jessica's like, I honestly don't want to do this. And I was like, so let's hit record.
Let's hit record.
Let's do this.
That means let's just go so you can't back out and start coming up with alternative questions. And so here's the thing. I think there's a couple reasons why this whole idea of body image and embracing body image publicly held me back. One is I'm still in process. And I had this false idea, and I even talk about it in this chapter that we're discussing today, Own Your Worth, that you needed to have a bow on it before you could kind of put it out there and start leading others. So that was one false belief, that I needed a bow on it before I could talk about it. And the other thing was just fear of becoming a poster child for body image. And I think that was a fear because I'm like, this is just one part of my journey. It's not all of it. But I have to say, Brene Brown, I mean, in her research and in so many other people's research, it says there's only 2% of the entire population that has not struggled with not liking something about themselves.
I want to know who those 2% are.
I do too. I haven't met them.
I haven't either. Maybe they're lying. I don't
Well,
know.
I might have met one because I was doing an interview last week for a journalist, and she asked me, she says, because this is in the business section of Barnes and Noble. It is a story of business, but it weaves in so many other topics. And so she said, why body image? Like, why is that something you ended up talking about? And it took me off guard because I was like, well, did that not resonate with a felt need in your life? She was acting shocked that I would talk about this. And I'm like, I think most women deal with this. So this is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And the truth is, Jenna, I know your current story and how you've embraced this and how it is part of your purpose and your branding now. Tell me the story behind the story. Like, tell me your journey of embracing your worth, realizing there were some negative voices in your life and overcoming those, and not that you've overcome completely, because we are a work in progress. But can you tell me a little bit about your journey in this area of your life?
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I was a gymnast and I started gymnastics at the age of 3. And so by the time I was 12, 13, 14, overnight, I'd become a woman. And I realized, like, I can't do this sport much longer. I've got to go to plan B, which kept me in Lycra. And I transitioned into being a springboard diver. And so I went from being a gymnast to a diver and ended up diving all 4 years in college. Not many people know that I was a collegiate athlete. But I feel like when I look at my journey with my body, so much of it is shaped around being an athlete and then finding my identity in that. But also the struggle of showing up every day and revealing things that show every bump and every curve. And so, as I've become a woman and an adult, I've had so many of the narratives replaying in my head. If you were lighter, you would flip faster. If you were thinner, you would look better. And when you look at the media representation of women, I remember ripping out Thinspiration as a young child of women that were thin and workouts and Googling what Britney Spears did to get her abs and then committing to doing 500 crunches a day to look like that. And I think that 99% of women have had disordered eating at some point in their life. And I absolutely have struggled with that. And I feel like so often we tell ourselves these lies, like, when I am married, this will stop. When I am successful, this will stop. When I am pregnant, this will stop. And yet it's something that we are all dealing with every single day. And so when you said you didn't want to be the poster child for body image, that is something that has become a piece of me, not necessarily by choice, but being thrust into this position to actually talk about it.
Right. Because I think if you look back,
Mm-hmm.
and there had to have been some limiting beliefs even before then, during your gymnast career, that created this idea of you needed to be this certain size in order to be a successful gymnast. I mean, there's so much pressure in that sport in particular. And
Yes.
and then tell me about, I want to hear a little bit more, because I feel like you had a choice then
Mm-hmm.
to just get completely out of athletics at that point. I mean, you could have just said like, well, I'm out. I'm going to become like the student council president, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. But you continue to push through and pursue another sport that does involve lycra, like you said. Tell me where that came from.
I think that for many of us, myself especially, I've always lived in an identity crisis. Where is my identity found? And when I was growing up, it was in being a gymnast. We didn't have high school gymnastics, so I was club. And I just remember, like, the second anyone would ask me about myself, I would say, I'm a gymnast. And then going into college, the same thing happened. My identity was being found in being an athlete. And I felt like it was the way that I showed up in the world was like with these titles. And looking even at my career, we find our worth in titles and what people think of those titles. And I now currently am like a size 10, 12. And I feel good in my skin for probably the first time in so long. But I didn't ever really let my insecurity show. I masked it with confidence. And behind closed doors was when you would sit there and poke and prod and look at all the imperfections and have those dialogues with yourself where you are the nastiest human being to yourself. And I think about the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we speak about ourselves. And if we heard anyone else doing that, we would smack them in the face and say, "You cannot talk like that." And yet that is what we do to ourselves. And I think that so much of how we were raised is that the media portrayed one version of beautiful, one version of beauty that we all subscribe to, and that we always felt less than because we didn't fit that mold.
Mhm. I think for you, it was athleticism and then the media on top of that. For me, I grew up in a culture that appearance was super, super important.
Mhm.
And I would say a big majority of the girls in my high school struggled with eating disorders. I mean,
Mhm.
legit, you would be able to say, oh, so and so's in treatment right now. And I remember the first time I realized that my body wasn't the problem, it was the way I thought about my body. I met a gal right after college, and she was like 6'2", had to special order her clothes, and her feet were really, bigger than the average woman's foot. And she grew up on a farm somewhere in the Midwest. Jenna, you Midwestern girls, I love the Midwest. I love Midwesterners. My husband's a Midwesterner. And I began to tell her some of my struggles, and she didn't have one single issue with her body. Like, she was like, "Yeah, I love my body. I mean, I don't know. What are you talking about?" And that's when I realized that it wasn't my body, because I think for so long I thought, well, my body's the problem.
Mhm.
Therefore, if I fix my body, then I'm going to feel less pain in life. I'm going to be more accepted. For you, I think it was like, I'll get the title of,
Mhm.
this is how I'll look on the diving board or whatever. When do you think you realized, okay, it's not my body, it's how I think about my body? And then how did you begin to change your thinking?
Yeah, so I remember the exact moment. I was at a conference. I was with about 4 women. We were all the speakers, and we were sitting at a table eating dinner. And somebody said, "I hate my nose." And then somebody said, "I hate my thighs."
Hmm.
And it slowly turned into this hate fest where we were all pointing out our biggest insecurities about our bodies. And as I looked at these women, I was just quiet and I thought, I would have never noticed your nose. I think your nose is adorable. And those freckles you hate, that is what I love. And so I made them all commit that the next morning I got to come into their room before they got out of bed, and I got to take photos of them, just how they woke up before
Wow.
their feet hit the
Wow.
floor, what they looked like. If only just for them to have those images to see what I saw in them. And I think that sometimes our greatest teacher is how we can pull out the best things about other people. But if somebody were to ask you, "Jessica, what is the best thing about yourself?" It'd be so hard to even think of something? And
Totally.
so I turned the camera on my friends. I called it the "I woke up like this" type challenge. And my one friend, who is also a photographer, said, "Well, this isn't fair. If you're doing this to us, like, we got to be able to do it for you." And so she took
And you
these
were like, no, no, no,
photos.
no, no,
I know.
no,
I
no,
was
no,
like, that's
no.
not how this works. And she took these photos, and I remember exactly what I was wearing. I had a mismatched bra and underwear on, and a little kimono, and my eyebrows were different shapes, and just all the things that we can hide and mask. And I posted that picture, and I just talked for the first time, and this was probably 4 years ago, just about the struggle of being behind the camera, and why so many photographers love to shoot other people but hate being photographed themselves. And I remember just showing up vulnerable like that. And my parents were not entirely pleased that their daughter was showing up in bra and underwear online, which now is a common occurrence, and they've totally bought into because they can see the bigger mission at hand. And so I just remember thinking, like, if these are the ways that we're speaking about ourselves, like if hating us if hating ourselves got us anywhere, we would have already arrived. And so that was really when I started to share and started to talk about this a little bit more.
Okay. And so tell us about that process, because there is something like, I mean, I have to be honest with you. I'm not proud to admit this, but we just had our first ever plus size model on the front of our Noonday Collection lookbook. She's gorgeous. It's actually one of my favorite lookbooks ever. And I think the reason I had held back is because had still found the things we find uncomfortable in ourselves, we're going to find uncomfortable in other people. And if we're
Mhm.
not accepting something fully in ourselves, then we're not going to accept that in others. And honestly, that was a lot of my motivation for change, because it's like, I don't want to show up as a judgmental person in the world about how people look. But if that is how I'm
Mhm.
treating myself, you extend that. Like, it is just science. It is like human behavior of how we behave. And so now I realize, like, during this journey of being able to own my worth and accept myself first, just as I am, not like, okay, when this
Mhm.
happens, then I'll accept myself, but really flip that narrative on its head. I now accept others and create a space for others. And so I'm really proud of our newest lookbook, but it's still been a vulnerable journey, like a little here and there, putting it out there. So you started to put it out there. Did that begin an even deeper healing process? What were some of the tensions that you held then? Because I know for me, I found like, okay, accept myself just as I am. But then it's also okay if I'm wanting to be my best self and get a little bit of extra weight off. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, that's kind of the tension. So tell us about that journey 4 years ago up until today.
Huh. When I look at myself 4 years ago, now I just see such a beautiful woman and I'm like, "What? Really? You were insecure? Like, are
Isn't
you
that
kidding me?"
crazy?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
like, "Walk
Yeah.
around naked, like, you look great."
Right.
Uh, and I
Totally.
feel like hindsight is always just, like, crazy where I can look at images and remember the exact insecurity I was feeling as that photo was being taken, and look at it years later and say, "I don't even notice my arms in that," or, "I don't even notice my chin," or whatever we were dealing with. And so as I started sharing, I started to just talk about that dialogue and the struggle. But it's funny because I look at myself 4 years ago and I had no idea I was about to be derailed in the body image movement when we had our first miscarriage. And so,
Mm,
it's easy to talk about loving yourself and to sell that idea of self love. But when you go through something as raw as infertility or miscarriage or anything like that, that intimately involves your body and your body not doing what you believe it should, the amount of hate that you can feel towards your body is
mm,
insane. And so
mm,
I remember we had found out we were pregnant the first time, which was 2.5 years ago. And I remember just being so blissful and being just so excited and thinking, my body is a miracle and this is a miracle and
mm,
this is so crazy. And when we found out that we lost the baby 10 weeks in, I remember thinking, how am I ever going to forgive myself? How am I
mm,
ever going to not feel shame about this? And I remember too, and I feel like people don't talk about this when it comes to this subject, is like your husband did his part, or your partner, or whatever that is for you, did their part. And now you drop the ball, not just for you, but for them. And so it was like this gravity of loss on so many levels. Um, and so when I really started sharing about it, like really getting to the heart of it, kind of what you were saying before, like, is it a wound or is it a scar? And I think that I was showing up in the wound state. Like, there was no pretty bows. There was only like the rawness of like, I feel like a failure and I want to say these things about myself before anyone else has the opportunity to say them for me. And I think that it's
mm,
almost this coping mechanism of saying, I know I have cellulite. I know I have curves. I know I'm
mm,
not a size 2 because if I say these things, it doesn't give you the opportunity to say them and shock me. And so when I look at the different seasons of us sharing just my journey with my body, self love was hard before our losses, but it was even harder when we had not one, but two miscarriages back to back, same exact scenario where it was like, what is actually
mm,
wrong with me? And so it's been this journey of just continually showing up. And what I think is so beautiful but is misleading, like you said about the self-love movement, is that it's not being complacent with your body. Okay,
Right.
like it's
That's
not
where I think
just
there's a
saying, yeah,
tension.
like I think that the problem with the self-love movement right now is that we're only seeing women that are beyond a size 10 talking about it, where it can actually lead to like unhealthy ideals, where it's like, oh, just love yourself, treat yourself, indulge, whatever that is. But what I want to teach others is like self love is like figuring out how to fuel your body and how to move your body and what is the best version of you. And yes, it is okay to love yourself, quote, flaws and all. But don't you want to be better because you love yourself, not in spite of it?
Well, and that really is, oh my gosh. I mean, I just remember the moment where, and I think it was like 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, where, I mean, you can look back through my journals throughout 30 years of my life. They're like, I want to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help? Like praying to God, like, will you help me lose weight? I mean, I have journals and journals of food journals. I've got numbers written down. I've got like, it didn't happen this week, but maybe next week, like, oh my gosh, just it pains me to see all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized 4 years ago, I remember looking at my husband and saying, I don't want to be thin. I want to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be accepted. I want to belong. And acceptance and belonging does not come from the size of my body. Like I have to belong to myself first and accept myself first. And that's when I stopped dieting, like totally stopped the whole like, okay, it's a Monday morning. This is what I'm going to do this week
Mm-hmm.
train that I had been on for 30 years and really stopped. I mean, full on stopped for a good couple of years. And now it's like the pendulum swing is coming back where I'm like, okay, I accept myself. I love myself. And because of that, I want to eat less carbs and sugar this week because it makes me feel bad and it's really not good for
Mm-hmm.
you. But it is such a difference when it comes from like, I'm doing this because I want to lose weight, because if I lose weight, I'll look better. And if I look better, people will love me more.
Mm-hmm.
And that is so different from saying, my body is beautiful. It's awesome. I love it. And because of that, I'm going to eat healthy this week to show my body how much I love it. And then I'm going to feel empowered and I'm going to feel like I love myself. And when I feel like I love myself and I'm not in shame and I'm not self shaming, I love others.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy how you can get to the same outcome, but with a totally different mindset. So I love that you're saying that. So tell me, okay, this is what's crazy, Jenna. So Jenna's been talking about this stuff, and I knew she'd been posting pictures of herself in a swimsuit. And I just kind of thought, I just don't know if I could do that. And then lo and behold, I'm like with a photographer in Haiti a few months ago. And she's a curvy woman and that helped me too, and honestly,
Mhm.
the pictures you've taken of me that you took of me in Guatemala, they're my
Yes.
favorite pictures ever. And I think it's because there is that sense of self-acceptance coming from you. And I
Mhm.
feel your love and I feel you wanting me to feel loved and confident. And it just like put me at ease. So thank you for those
Oh.
photos. They're everyone's favorite at the office too. So anyway, I'm in Haiti and I'm like, okay, we'll snap a photo, but there's no way I'm going to post it. Like there is no way. And then I remember just driving from the beach to the airport and I just wrote this post where I finally just sort of outed myself. And it was kind of like you, like, I better out myself before someone else outs me. I love that. It's like fear of failing in front of others. Well, I'm just going to nip that one in the bud. I'm just going to say it out loud. Okay, so I started my little journey and you definitely have had a journey. But then this spring, I'm scrolling through your feed and I'm like, stop the scroll. You have a picture of you and your husband and you say that someone had written something nasty on the internet, like, how did you land that guy? And I completely related because my husband is, I mean, I'm sure my arms are bigger than my husband's. And I know you talk about that as well. Especially we're in the middle of remodeling our house right now. He's doing all the work. He's dropped like 20 pounds in the last month. I'm like, this is not right. This is not okay. Now you're definitely, your arms are smaller than mine. And so I was relating to this post. I stop my scroll, I give it a like, probably commented, and then I come back later and it's got a like bazillion likes. And then suddenly you have like hundreds of thousands of more followers. And I'm like, what on earth just happened? And I guess a media outlet had picked it up and people resonated so well with the story that everyone just rallied around the story. But that outed you in a whole new way. Like, it's one thing when you're doing your little personal Instagram, it's your audience that you know. And now suddenly you are talking to people that you don't know if they're going to be safe. You don't know what they're going to say. And now hundreds of thousands come into you because of this message. Tell me a little more post. It's just been like 3 or 4 months. Tell me a little bit about that process for you and how that's played into a deeper level of healing for you, perhaps, I hope.
Yeah. So the funniest part about the whole going viral thing was it was actually a friend of mine because I just recorded an episode for my podcast about handling criticism. And in that episode, I was reading off like nasty comments or things that people had said about me or to me. And so it was just really front of mind of like, people don't understand that with a platform comes critics and trolls, to be honest. And so that night I met up with my girlfriends. We were having a little girls' night and I was sitting in the parking lot and I'm like, oh, I should probably get a post up. And so I just wrote it really fast and I actually like put my phone in my bag and didn't look at it again. So I had no idea what was going on. But in the post, I had someone reach out and kind of made a comment like, how did you, a girl like you, land a guy like your husband? And my husband has a 6-pack. He's so toned. And here I am, a size 10, size 12. And I just kind of clapped back at that critic and just said, you know, he's loved my body through every season, every stage, every pimple, dimple, bump. And yes, it got picked up by pretty much every outlet. And so, pretty much overnight, within like a week, I went from 200,000 followers, which is still a really big platform, to over 500,000. And in this process, we were also moving homes. We were trying to get pregnant. And it was just this crazy season. And while there were so many people jumping on board in a positive way, I read the comments and that almost derailed me
Oh my gosh.
because the first night that it went viral, the first media outlet was Yahoo News to pick it up. And I start reading the comments and people were saying, stop calling her curvy. She's fat. She's a whale. Like, he's only with her for her money. He's probably gay and she's his cover up. I mean, it was the most vile things ever said, not just about me, but about my husband. And I felt this responsibility because I had put this out here and now my husband's getting ridiculed. And my mom had shared the article on her Facebook page. And all I could think about was all of her friends reading those comments of what strangers were saying about me. And it was honestly devastating. And so after that first post went up, every outlet picked it up and it became a very positive thing. But we definitely had to get through some of the negativity. And so what was really like shocking to me about it is I had already had a large platform, but all of a sudden when it doubles overnight, it made me want to crawl into a shell and like hide because I didn't know who these people were. I didn't know why they chose to follow. I didn't know what they expected of me. I didn't know what conversation they wanted me to continue. They didn't know anything about me. And as someone who had found her identity as an entrepreneur, all of a sudden I'm being looked at as this person that needs to talk about body positivity. And here we are trying to get pregnant after losses. And I'm just on my own roller coaster. And so it was almost embarrassing to me to suddenly have 500,000 followers. It felt like when people looked me up, they would say, oh, what are you famous for? And what am I going to say? Because I have a picture of me in my swimsuit next to my good looking husband. That's why I'm famous. And so it
So
really
that was the
caused
narrative. that
Yes.
false narrative.
Yes, it caused me to go so deeply inward that all of a sudden it was like I was paralyzed. And while so many people want a big following, like I knew what was potentially coming with that. And so it's just been a really interesting process. I feel like I finally got my groove back. I finally like figured out like how do I want to handle this? What do I want that to look like? But it took a long time to get there.
Okay, and because I can talk Enneagram on my podcast, threes
Yes.
go to nine. So you were probably just like stuck. You're like, I don't
Well,
want to move. Give me all the
yeah.
Netflix for the rest of
Oh,
my life.
it was hard.
Okay, so the narrative, how did you flip that narrative? Because the negative narrative, the self-talk, I call it the itty bitty bologna sauce committee in my book, if we're going to play polite, was that people are following me because of this picture of my good looking husband. Like you were almost feeding into like, I don't know. It's like that whole thing, like we become what other people see in us. And so if you
Mhm.
choose to see through their eyes, then that's what you would become. So then where did you draw your strength from to say, no, this is actually, I'm going to use this into my strengths. I'm going to use this to create more positivity. What flipped the script?
I think that I realized like we have an opportunity and clearly the world is hungry for something that they cared about this story, that they cared enough to find me and follow us. And what we really noticed is like there is so much problem because this post went viral. Like there is such a need that it is so crazy for people to believe that a size 10 women would have the audacity to marry a good looking handsome man.
Mm,
And we realized like so many things came out of that where they would say Drew's name and then they would call me wife or woman. There is so much
mm,
that we gleaned from that where we were like, this is why we have to keep this up. People need an example of marriage. People need to know there are more layers than just what we see. And we had to continue that conversation in a way that would like shine a light, like not just on our love, but like on God's love and like what does God say about us and our bodies. And so
mm,
we started to really move forward as a pair, as a united front, because Drew went from like 10,000 followers to 100,000 overnight.
mm.
And so we kind of started to say, like, how do we show what a real relationship looks like? How do we talk about this in a way that isn't always just about our bodies or the way we look, but about how we feel? And so it's definitely been like this journey of figuring out like what is the message, what is the mission, and then
Oh my
how do we
gosh.
share that in a way that like inspires other people?
Okay, so I'm going to turn this a little businessy now because you talked about how Drew gained all these followers. You did. How have you converted those new followers that came to you from something very specific into your business classes, into your podcast? Like, how have you been able to create business results from that viral post?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably one of the first thoughts as a strategic businesswoman, which is exactly what I am, is like, what do we do with these people? How do we serve them? And so a couple different things have happened. So I've taken on a few big sponsorships with companies like Aerie to continue that message and to be able to continue to share about self-love in a really big way with a company that I really genuinely love. But then also to make sure that we're having conversations just like this on my own show, and to really continue that conversation. But it's almost like starting over again. Like people don't know that I started as a wedding photographer. People don't know that, I'm an expert in X, Y, and Z. And so it's so hilarious because I know if I post a photo where I'm in a bathing suit or in a bra and underwear and I'm talking about body image, I know it's going to do really well. But then if I go to talk about the things that actually drive profits into my
Yeah.
business, it's like, it feels like a flop, but I know every single person that double taps or hits like that's somebody that can be impacted in that. And so it's definitely a different way of looking at it. And it's definitely like a slow process. But putting out resources for every woman, not just entrepreneurs, is something that we've been totally challenged and caught off guard by. And it's just one of those things too, where you're just like, okay, why are they here and how do we help them?
Totally. It's like you suddenly had to adapt really quickly to understanding this new audience and to kind of recreate your business a little bit, or just know how to channel them in. But I'm sure you've done an awesome job because, girl, you're like one of the most strategic people I've ever met.
Love it.
Okay, so you're pregnant. Congratulations.
Yes. Thank
So
you.
thrilled, so happy. That alone can trigger. It can.
Mhm.
Now, you came through it out of infertility, so your experience, that might really be painting your experience in a really positive way. I know for me, I have such big memories of weighing myself when I was 8 at the Weight Watchers meetings that I went to, that having to start weighing myself at these appointments brought all of that back. So,
Mhm.
how are you approaching this new season of your body changing, which can again be such a vulnerable season? And tell me some of the things that you're saying and doing to help be gentle with your body during this time.
Yeah, I mean, I was telling you before, like, pregnancy has not been easy for me. I wish I was one of those women who, like, felt fully alive while pregnant, but I felt half dead while pregnant. And it's been so hard because we prayed so much for this gift and this blessing, and I do not take a single day for granted. Every day that I wake up and see that little app that tells me how long this baby has been cooking, like, I am just so thankful, because after you've been through loss like we have, you don't take this for granted. But from a body standpoint, it's been interesting because I am doing campaigns with some bigger clothing companies, and all of a sudden my clothes aren't fitting, and I've
Right.
got to show up daily in outfits and feel good in them. And the other day Drew was shooting photos, and I just was in this pit where I was just like, I don't even look pregnant. I just look fat, and my boobs are huge, and I like don't feel like myself. And he took these photos, and I said, just for the sake of, laughing someday, let's take a few belly shots. And I actually looked at them and I was like, wow, I look beautiful. Like,
Wow.
kind of like what you did with this swimsuit, where I was like, I will never post these ever. Like, they will never see the
Mhm.
light of the internet. And now I'm like, oh, I cannot wait to share this because of this season. But it is this awkward transition, and I was pulled into this comparison once again, where I was searching the hashtag for 14 weeks pregnant to see what other pregnant women looked like. And is my belly too big? Is it not big enough? Do I even
Mhm.
look pregnant? And I was shocked at that, because I'd gotten past that, or so I believed. And so, right now I am finally like feeling the baby kick and move. And I think that it's just been so helpful, but I actually had to do just a lot of work. I saw an acupuncturist because I was so, so sick. And
Mhm.
she said, how are you doing? And I said, I am so disconnected from this pregnancy as a coping mechanism because I'm so afraid that we'll lose it. And so I had to do a ton of heart work to even really be able to acknowledge that, this was happening.
Wow. And the weight gain?
It actually hasn't been that bad. I think I've gained I'm like
I'm not
halfway
asking you how
done.
much you've weighed.
No,
I'm
no,
just saying,
no.
like, how are
Like
you
how it
responding to
feels.
it? Yeah.
No, but I'm saying like my first trimester is so sick, all I could do was walk. And so it's really hard for me to not be able to work out.
Right.
Um and so now I'm finally able to go back to the gym, and I just feel so powerful. Like, I am
Mm.
doing this stuff and I'm pregnant, and it just feels like I'm doing this for both of us. Like, it's just so crazy. But I gained about like 10 pounds in my first trimester, and I didn't even know. I don't have a scale at home. But I'm just trusting that my body knows what it's doing, and that I am just doing the very best I can. And it was
Mhm.
really hard being so sick because there were very few foods that I could actually eat. I was on extra hormones that had all these side effects. And so it was honestly like I was shaming myself. Like, I said when I was pregnant, I would eat only organic. And now all I can eat is mac and cheese because it's the only thing my stomach can keep down. And, it was just this like, gosh, it just never ends, does it?
It doesn't, and that's okay. I think that
Yes.
if we have a point of arrival, we're always gonna fall short, and I think if
Yes.
we realize that this is just a journey, and I think that's what I really wanted to come across today, is we are all on different spots in the journey, but we are all, walking it out, and we're not ever going to arrive, and that should
Mhm.
bring us a lot of freedom to be imperfect, a lot of freedom to go, I'm having a hard day and not think, oh my gosh, I've regressed by 10 years, you know, but just to
Yes.
say, you know what, I'm having a hard day, or I'm pregnant now. So what's this going to look like now that I'm pregnant? How am I going to feel about myself now that I'm pregnant? I love what Oprah said. And I mean, so many people have quoted her since, but at the Golden Globes this year. And she's like, owning our truth, speaking our truth is the most powerful tool that a woman has. And she was talking about the Me Too movement. But frankly, when we can stand up, own our truth, and speak it, which is how your whole journey began when you had women wake up in the morning and you took a photo of them and they flipped it on you and said, I'm going to take a photo of you, and you posted it. There is an element, like, let's say this is something good about the internet, is being able to come forward, and once we begin to own our full truth and not own all the filters and try to correct everything, but say, this is me, and I accept me, then the change can come. And I think the change, I'm not talking about losing weight. I'm talking about self-love. Like, that's when change. And then you're driven not by fear in your journey to, kind of have a better body or whatever, but you're driven by love.
Yep, exactly.
And gosh, I think that's what we all want, is to be driven by love. Okay, so tell me, we're going to wrap it up. What is next for you? Like, what are you up to now? I mean, obviously you're pregnant. I want to know what's in the works now with you and Drew, now as y'all are collaborating more.
So we're just really preparing for this next season. And I know people say you're never fully ready, but I think with our past, we really are as ready as we possibly can be to embrace this next stage. And so I am on an automation kick for my business. I am really saying no so that I can say yes to whatever feels right when this baby comes. And I'm really trying to not set expectations around anything, whether it's the birth or breastfeeding or anything like that. I definitely have goals, but I want to be able to just trust that I will know what is best. And so I want to give myself the flexibility. If I feel like taking 3 months off or a year off, like, what does that look like as a powerful businesswoman? And how can I just set myself up so that whatever feels right can happen without feeling too much sacrifice? And so we're really excited for this next season. So many things are still going to be happening. And my goal and my vision for next year is to just be home a lot more, doing what I love and being with the people that I love the most.
I love that. I love that so much. And I love that you've been able to create a business that's going to be able to do that for you.
Yes.
That's super inspiring. Thanks for being vulnerable. Thanks for being the first. For me, you were one of the first to go. And I'm going now. It's a book, man. That's black and white. You can't erase that off the internet. It's just there.
Oh,
So,
I'm
story.
so excited. And I'm just so thankful. I think back to those conversations in Guatemala, and you and I were able to say me too to each other more often than I think we even anticipated. And I think that is the power of just sharing and showing up.
I loved today's conversation. If you resonated with any part of today's conversation, then hop on over to Amazon or Target or wherever books are sold and get a copy of Imperfect Courage, because so much of the book is really about embracing vulnerability. Also, if you haven't left a review on iTunes for this podcast, could you go over and do that? It would mean so, so much to me. I share reviews on the podcast. I post them on my Instagram, and it just really helps us get the word out about this message of going scared and of embracing vulnerability and of embracing our own imperfect courage. Thanks so much for joining me for today's conversation. Our music for today's show is provided by my good friend, Ellie Holcomb. The Going Scared podcast is produced by Eddie Kolpoltz, and I'm Jessica Honegger. Until next time, let's take each other by the hand and keep going scared.